Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, Jaybefaunt Leroy. So good to see all of you today on this beautiful Tuesday. It's July 14th, 2026. We are live. I hope you guys all have already grabbed yourself a snack, grab yourself something to drink, preferably water because it is hot as I don't know what outside, and you guys have your feet up ready to relax. Welcome to everybody that's watching on YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, and Kick. We are live. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out very much to be able to reach the people as much as we possibly can because these algorithms do suppress us here. And if you guys are watching this on the rewatch, please do not be afraid to smash the hype button as well. If you guys have not already, also you can subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. Gives you email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. So you guys have that there as well. And if you guys would like to, you guys can ask me a question. I give a video response, or you guys submit a video and then I react to the video through QBounty at qbounty.com/Jaybefaunt. So good to see every single one of you guys here today. We have a big show today. We have two people who are veterans and they're organizing space that will be joining us today. And I cannot wait to get into these conversations because this is going to be much needed, especially for those of us who are on the left. And one of the things that we're trying to do now is we're trying to coalesce and push forth real movement outside of this kind of establishment type of energy that is surrounding. Remember, we're in a midterm election year, and so a lot of people are focused on the midterms. But what about beyond that? And also, what are we going to be doing to help people see beyond the horizon? Well, in order to be able to see beyond the horizon, you also have to look behind you to see where you've been. And we have a couple of veterans that are going to be joining us to have this discussion throughout the show. So if you guys have not already, please go ahead and turn your attention to the thumbnails that we have for today. Later in the show today, we're going to be talking to Chairman Omali Yeshitela from the African People's Socialist Party, part of the Uhuru 3. And yes, we have spoken to him before, as well as members of the African People's Socialist Party and how they were indicted by the Justice Department, unjustly indicted by the Justice Department. Well, the fight continues, and we will be discussing that a little bit later in the show. We're also going to be discussing the issue here in Florida regarding workers. You have security guards that are now fighting against Seaworld just to be able to afford to live. So we're going to be talking about that. Of course, we got to continue the class aspect about this, especially here in Florida. This is a right to work state. And so we want to make sure that we continuously keep our support behind the workers who are trying to make a living to take care of their families. But first, we have veteran and also co-founder of Food Not Bombs, Mr. Keith McHenry joining, and he tells all in his new memoirs. And I am very interested to hear some of the stories that he lays out in these memoirs. And it also gives us more of a background into how our government operates as well. And this also gives us an inkling on how we could move as far as our activism goes and adapt it to 21st century tactics and ways in which we can actually help the workers. So we're going to be starting off with that, and we're going to be discussing with Keith McHenry, spilling the tea, activist, organizer, and co-founder of Food Not Bombs. Mr. Keith McHenry, so good to have you back on.
Oh, thank you, James. That's exciting. That's so cool. So, yeah, I hope I have some lessons in my book on how to organize and what one of my friends who's on the executive staff of the National Union of the Homeless, he's been reading it and he's like, yeah, this is a handbook on how to organize in a certain way because I reveal these things through my stories.
Yeah, I mean, that's really one of the biggest things. I think that's a lot of murmurs on the left, right? A lot of us are saying, okay, so for instance, a lot of people have been talking about Graham Plattner and his exit from political life, because of the allegations, the sexual assault allegations against him. And you have many people on the left who are now feeling despondent because their dependency on electoral politics, particularly within duopoly, has made them feel more depressed in that way. And so I and many others in this space have been trying to get people to realize that electoral politics is not the end all be all. I know people like myself, Savvy Sabs, Nico House, we have been chiming in and basically telling people, hey, this is not the end all be all. But what is your thoughts on the state of the left? And is it exclusively just an online thing, or is it outside? And then we can start getting into some of the lessons that are taught within your book.
Yeah, well, I think that I don't really necessarily think of people, but definitely Democrats as left. That I would not think of that. And I think that it's electoral politics is essentially a waste of time, sadly. Now, my grandfather, who I write about in Soup Street, was in the Office of Strategic Services, which OSS, which became CIA, and before World War II, he was in military intelligence, and he frequently told me that the intelligence community determines the outcome of the elections. That the purpose of elections and the reason that it's a duality, that it's two Republicans and Democrats that have exactly the same politics, is to divide the country so that we fight each other and we're never a threat to the people that employed the CIA and the intelligence community. That they determine everything, and you can see how they do that. Probably the Hunter Biden story and the 53 intelligence agents saying it was Russian disinformation to make sure, for whatever reason, the intelligence community wanted Biden to be the president. They manipulated events intentionally. So it's not like they have a big magic wand and they, okay, this person is going to be the president. They manipulate events to make sure they get, at almost every important level of government, who they want into power. And you see, they might use blackmail, like you see in the Epstein case, or maybe financial issues, or the people that they choose just go, side with what the intelligence community really wants. So in Soup Stock, actually, Soup Street, I have a chapter where I'm working on a graphic design project for what turns out to be the head of the mafia in New England. And it's travel brochures. And it was a really interesting scam that she was running. Basically, Midwestern people would buy the travel package and go all expense paid trip to Italy, but they'd end up going through either Zurich or Rome for one night, and then they'd be in Palermo for a week, and that was during the mafia trials in Palermo. So in the 30 days that I would interact with her, go and show her proof, the design and stuff, I would hear people calling very angry that their relative that they bought the package for, or themselves, couldn't leave the hotel because of the gunfire and the bombing outside. Well, during the 30 days, I'm this Michael Dukakis shows up. He's the governor of Massachusetts at the time, and he's running for president of the United States. And I hang out with him for about 30 minutes with Donna Franca Franzaroli, whose name I can now say because she passed. Just talking about the Boston Pops or the weather. And in 30 days, he popped in twice for 30-minute calls about nothing. So clearly, the Democratic Party was receiving its funding for presidential campaign candidates in part from organized crime. So that those kind of tales show that that basically the entire thing is a scam, and so I have very rarely ever, I support like a local candidate or some kind of local thing that's happening. But I've never, and even at that, I don't think I've ever voted for anybody that actually won anything. It's just essentially a huge waste of time, and also to spend the energy participating in the battle between, you look at indivisibles, no kings or hands off NATO. I've written a lot about that on my Substack. Anarchist Cook was essentially set up in advance of the first Trump election, because they knew there'd be so much angst about the horrible, terrible things that Trump would do. And but they wanted to make sure there was no actual opposition. Like right now, if you were indivisible and you had Act Blue and Our Revolution email accounts, you could send out an email, and they brag they get up 7 million people showing up to their events. They could have 7 million people out there against Trump's war on Iran. But they don't, right? They have not yet done that. And that's because the people that fund Indivisible are the same ones that funded, for instance, the NGOs that led to the coup in 2014 in Ukraine. They're the ones behind the color revolutions that are now being forced on people in Indonesia and the Philippines, and the Hong Kong color revolution that failed. So basically, Indivisible is our color revolution here in the United States. It's controlled opposition, and their only thing is Trump is bad. Thankfully, since two white people were killed in Minneapolis, they've added no ICE to that's their only demand, really. Vote blue, and we're against ICE. But and I think they only did that because they're desperate. They realize that no one, that they're just like a bunch of boomers, people my age, that go out and hold signs and really have no demands, right? They don't have any no war demands. They don't have. So it's a really, that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks is the electoral politics. And I'm sure already you can see, and they're posting stuff for the midterm. And it's just a scam that's designed specifically to make sure that the people don't organize in such a way that we would be a threat to power. And that was one of the lessons that my grandfather imparted to me before he passed away when I was 14.
Wow, man. It's just, you start to realize how deeply entrenched things are. And in your travels, and your experiences, you have seen essentially how the sausage is made from an outsider's perspective. If you can recount some of those things that you have seen, especially that would help us to be able to keep things into to see the bigger picture today, so that we don't feel so dejected when it comes to actually movement building.
Yeah, well, I think that really people are really much more compassionate and kind than the mainstream media and the social media manipulation makes it out to be. And you could so my suggestion, generally speaking, is to stay away from electoral politics, but to see that there is hope and that people are getting together. They're right now. I think one of the most effective ways is to do things like mutual aid, where you're meeting your neighbors, you're meeting your friends, and you're building solidarity in your own community, and you're demystifying the idea that there's the other, and that is really, really important. And but also to not be intimidated by the intelligence community's actions. So the Prairieland defendants, Singh and the others who got like decades, Singh's case, they were organizing a noise campaign on 4th of July last year in solidarity with the inmates and the ICE detention center, outside of Fort Worth. Well, they were set up by the intelligence community to be an intimidation to all activists, to look at this could happen to you, and if you watch the actual videos that the Defense Committee has put up recently, you could see there were just nice young people from Food Not Bombs and other local mutual aid groups in the Fort Worth area, and they had a big heart. And they launched these fireworks and they did a little graffiti. But then a security guard came out and started shooting at them. And there appears to be, according to the original charging documents, that there was 2 shooters, so to speak, supposedly shooting at these security guards. And one of the guy that started opening fire on these protesters who were just walking away. They weren't intending to hurt anybody or anything. Somebody fired off a round that actually injured the security guard, and then Singh though got charged with firing at him. But it's pretty unlikely that his bullet. He shot apparently 1 bullet. They say it ricocheted, it hit the guy, and therefore he should get 100 years in prison. But we shouldn't be intimidated by that. I mean, unfortunately there should have been a lot more organizing and support for them before they went to trial, but because we don't have a lot of resources, it was not, we weren't effective. But the thing is that the intelligence community manipulates a lot of events, and particularly in the activist community. I think we are not aware of how much goes on. So in my book, Soup Street, I have like a case where I meet some activists over in Spain, and we do this tour of we agree to do a tour of the United States and Canada called the Unfree Trade Tour. We're going to build a movement against the World Trade Organization and against the international banking, and so we speak in 60 cities, and the weirdest thing is that each night, after the presentation, we showed a video called 50 Years is Enough against the Bretton Woods, convention, which started, and it was mostly protest videos against the EU. I was very involved in the early protests against the EU when I was touring Europe. And turns out every night, a doorbell would ring at about midnight, 2 o'clock, and it would be the mailman or UPS delivering a package that needed to be signed for. And this happened virtually every night for 60 nights. In one case in Lawrence, Kansas, when we were visiting the Leonard Peltier Air Defense Committee, an insurance man came by at 1:30 with a tape measure, and he's snapping his tape measure, and he's saying, "Oh, I've got to measure the ceilings for insurance purposes." And we're like, "Get out of here!" And the odd thing was that one of the, and then also there became like a whole email thing that was happening to all the Food Not Bombs chapters or anybody that was signing up on whatever this email list about how there was never any food and what was McHenry doing. We got, he hasn't fed us in 5 days, 8 days, and so on. And so we'd arrive at a Food Not Bombs house before the lecture, and our van was full of food, and the Food Not Bombs kids would say, "Oh, we got the email that you haven't eaten in days, but we see you have all this food in your car. What is up?" And that went on and on and on. And by the time we got to Richmond, Virginia, they thought, well, maybe no food means that there isn't any meat because we're vegan, right? But we'd have a big feast why would you go to a Food Not Bombs house and not have a big feast? And we had a big feast at every stop in all the 60 days. And it was later on, I was at the People's Global Agenda meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, was held for like 2 weeks when the World Trade Organization first started. And I had a little scrapbook, and I had a bunch of like articles and reprints from things. And in the beginning of it, I had my Basque newspaper clippings. And the Spanish delegation comes to me and they go, "We need to meet with you." So I go to their hotel room, and I'm sitting in a chair, and there's about 30 people all staring at me. And they would say, how do you know this guy that's in your scrapbook? And I go, oh, yeah, I went on a tour with him and we didn't get along very, very well. And part of the COINTELPRO operation that was happening in San Francisco was that I had treated the Spanish delegation poorly. Well, these people go, well, you know, don't you vet people very well? Because it turns out that this man is the most famous Interpol agent in Spain, and that he infiltrated like the anti-nuclear movement. He was in the anti-globalization movement. He was in the Basque movement, and in fact, he was the only infiltrator in the ETA cell that tried to blow up King Carlos at the Gary Art Museum in Bilbao. And then I go, oh, wow, that makes sense, because I'm sitting in the living room at the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. He allegedly speaks no English. He's reading the Kansas City Star, and he's super, super happy. And he's pointing out an article about, you know, the failed attempt to kill King Carlos, and he's all excited about it. And we're just, me and the other Spaniards on the tour were just thinking, well, that's really weird. He should be upset that the plot failed if he's a supporter of ETA. And it turned out he was the only one in this cell that was, that was law enforcement. And so you see that kind of thing. But the reality is, you know, I spent, over 50 years being an organizer. I've survived honey traps, like for instance, in one case, I was visiting somebody that hooked up with me in San Francisco because he ran a pirate radio station in the Czech Republic during the Velvet Revolution. So I went to visit him, and the friend that put me together thought, well, I do a pirate radio station, San Francisco Liberation Radio, and then he did a pirate radio station in Prague during the revolution. We might have something in common. Well, it turns out the woman staying at his apartment starts flirting with me, and she's trying to get me to go to Bosnia with her. She's going to take photos there. I could feed the children that were suffering. And then years later, I see that woman on TV, and it turns out her name was Samantha Powers, and she was already trying to be a honey trap. And then it made sense. I go, oh wow, the person I was visiting, you wouldn't be running a pirate radio station in the Velvet Revolution in Prague if you weren't associated with the CIA, right? In hindsight, it made sense, but at the time, I thought, oh, we're all radicals together. But I survived it. I didn't go to Bosnia. I didn't get killed. I didn't end up in the end having sex with Samantha Powers. But that's that kind of thing happens. But the reality is the human spirit is so strong, and that I think we can overcome a lot of this crisis. But I would expect that the current war is going to cause even more economic displacement, potentially even, as Donald Trump himself said, a Great Depression. And this may be upon us very soon. And the fact that there's between 1,000 and 1,500 Food Not Bombs chapters in the world who are doing mutual aid every week, in some cases every day, that is a very, very hopeful sign that when, in our town, Santa Cruz, California, every week we remind ourselves in an announcement for our weekly meeting that if phone service goes down, power goes out, there's a massive crisis, that we're all to meet at the same location downtown, and then we'll figure out the logistics of how to respond to it. And we know we have this practice because we did every day for 3 years during the COVID lockdown. We were the only food for homeless people and the only hand washing station for homeless people with hot water. And we were the only survival gear for homeless people every day for 3 years, because the other programs had to shut down or were shut down by the authorities. So we have practice. There's a lot of hope in that. And the thing that happens with me every day is I get emails. Like I just got an email from somebody who wants to volunteer with the London Food Not Bombs in the UK. There's usually one or two requests to be added to the foodnotbombs.net website to say they have a new chapter or they've expanded the number of meals per week and things like that. So there's a lot of hope behind the scenes on the ground. And so it's a matter, it's pretty dismal to see, what's happening. One of the saddest things currently, my first chapter is talks about growing up in Big Bend National Park on the Rio Grande. And I used to wade across the Rio Grande at Boquias often to play with my friends in this little village of maybe 150 people. And, now the Trump administration is building a wall along the Rio Grande. Now, nobody immigrates into the United States through the Rio Grande. It's like through Big Bend, Texas, because you would not live. It is way out in the middle of nowhere, very little fresh water until you get to the Rio Grande. And, that's really heartbreaking to see I grew up in national parks. There's that's how I ended up becoming a radical is my other grandfather that was not OSS, who was actually a medic in the trenches of Belgium in World War I. He became one of the earliest park rangers, and his first job was at the Grand Canyon. And on the way to the Grand Canyon, he crashed. And these Hopi farmers brought him to this village called Old Arabi. It's the oldest continually inhabited village in the United States. And he convalesced there and became friends with the elders. And so when I lived at the Grand Canyon, when my father was a district chief naturalist in the South Rim, we would go out to the dances. And so I got to see the snake dance and the green corn dances, and I got to see the sacred Hopi land before Peabody Coal came, before our family went where now it's Lake Powell, but at the time it was a canyon, Glen Canyon, and it was a beautiful, beautiful, Anasazi ruins. And then when I was 16, I was up on top of a mountain in the center of Utah, and I could see all the black smoke coming up all the valleys. And I realized that was coming from the Hopi land, where Peabody Coal had started strip mining Black Mesa, where they built coal-powered electric generating plants near Shiprock. They flooded Lake Powell, and they were generating electricity. So the huge high-tension wires were going through this beautiful sacred land. And it was at that moment I decided that I would dedicate my life to fighting any kind of economic or political system that would think that was reasonable to desecrate this sacred land. And so ever since then, and so I have a story about that in Soup Street as well. And that's I've ended up spending my entire life either organizing with Food Not Bombs and doing all the crazy jobs one have to do to make a living. And so I have another story about I took a job working for New Balance, making the letter N's in a factory. So if you look at New Balance tennis shoes, there's these letter N's. And when I was buying used clothing, so I would dress up to go for my job interview, I picked up a copy of 1984. So I read 1984 in the breaks, and it was like this very Orwellian, not only from reading the book, but also working in this drudgery of this factory, silk screening ends after ends. I was the manager of a team of 6 Puerto Ricans who have ended up spending their life making letter ends, and every once in a while, one of the older women would explode off of her chair from the electrothermotron connecting the current. And then I would have to push the big bag of letter ends into the hallway to block the entrance of my supervisor in case she found that my coworker was on the ground. And then we'd be giving her water and everything. I mean, this was like, factory life in America at the same. And then this, obviously, George Orwell's 1984 is now like, that's innocent compared to what we're facing right now with with AI surveillance data centers and flock cameras everywhere and all the other stuff that is monitoring us, probably in preparation for whatever disaster is evolving around the wars in against Russia and Iran and China. I mean, they're not building all this massive surveillance stuff just because just to make money making surveillance stuff. They're making it so that they can clamp down on us even more. So that was another story I have in Soup Street. So, but I think that there's a lot of optimism because part of it, the message is that it might take a long time to really change society. So, I was like 22 years old when I started Food Not Bombs in Boston. There's like 8 of us. We're super enthusiastic. It was just an amazing experience. And we organized for the very first actions we were building for was the June 12th, 1982 March for Nuclear Disarmament in New York City. And we would never imagine that, people will often ask, oh, well, did you imagine it would be in 1,000, 1,500 cities in the world when you started? And we go, oh, no, we were hoping there'd be a second group in Amherst, Massachusetts. That was our dream. And so it is amazing. You just persist. You have simple principles like Food Not Bombs, the 3 principles. The food's always vegan and vegetarian and free to anyone, rich or poor, drunk or sober. That there's no leaders, presidents, directors, that each chapter is autonomous and makes decisions by consensus, inviting the people that are needing the food to participate in guiding the direction of the organization, and that we're not a charity, but that we're dedicated to taking nonviolent direct action to change society so no one has to live in the streets or eat at a soup kitchen. And that simple principles is something that is people all over the world, whether you're in the Philippines or you're in Beijing, or if you're in Poland, or if you're in Moscow, or if you're in Ethiopia and Nigeria, people can unite around that, and that's what holds us together. And it's a kind of a stealth way of introducing people to community organizing, and to and it's very empowering because you see the direct results of the people that you are sharing food with, and how appreciative they are, and how amazing connections and personal relationships that you build as a direct result of volunteering with groups like Food Not Bombs.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to direct some attention to is that you have some prominent people that wrote blurbs in your book. I just want to show people some of the people who actually wrote blurbs in your book, and I think this is pretty reputable. The first one is from John Kiriakou, CIA torture whistleblower. He says, a vivid, unflinching memoir. Soup Street traces Keith McHenry's journey from wild American landscapes to frontline activism and torture survival, revealing how a life of hardship, courage, and compassion gave birth to Food Not Bombs and a global struggle for justice, dignity, and hope. That is pretty. That is a pretty big deal to come from a whistleblower like John Kiriakou to say that about your book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I was on his podcast. I was touring Mexico, and I was in Agua Caliente, did the interview, and then I went back to hang out with my friends in Monterrey, Mexico, and I had a bunch of more lectures there. And if after it was aired, I looked at the comments, and I'm like, oh wow, people might be interested in my book. And I'd already written the book, but hadn't laid it out yet. I made a bunch of decisions about, originally I had a literary agent. It turned out the genocide happened, and her contacts were all Zionists, so she dropped me. And then I thought, well, I don't want to end up like having it be owned by Amazon or some other self-publishing thing. So I'm a graphic designer. So when I read all those comments, I said, I'm just going to lay my book out right now. And so I did while I was in Monterey. And so one of the things that's in my book that John is referring to is that I was doing Food Not Bombs in San Francisco. I got picked up 3 times by somebody in a black van, which I did not, it was just a black van, and I was taken somewhere and through this hallways and taken to a room that had no lights on. They ripped my clothes off of me, lifted me by my arms and legs, smashed me repeatedly on the concrete floor, others kicking me in the head and in the side, yelling obscenities at me. And then they lifted me up and stuffed me in a stress position cage. Well, at the time, I thought, wow, this is police brutality gone bad. I didn't really consider that it was necessarily torture. So then that happened to me 3 times, and I became very disabled from it. I ended up ultimately getting fibromyalgia and suffering for about 20 years. And so but my lawyer said, whatever you do, don't describe this to anybody. It'll discredit you. They'll think that there's something wrong with you. Who would ever think that an American would have that happen to them and be stuffed into a stress position cage? No one would even know what a stress position cage is. So just stay quiet about it. In fact, interestingly, about 2 or 3 months ago, I was visiting with my ex-wife, and she had not known that any of this had happened because I kept it quiet from her. But she did mention she wondered what happened to me when I never called for 3 days on a number of occasions. Her assumption was I was jailed, but she didn't realize what was happening. But then I was living in Istanbul, and I go to have my birthday on the Bosphorus, and it's right at the time when Abu Ghraib and the torture was being announced. And when you went to Taksim Square, there was these massive, massive signs of the famous photos of the man on a box with electrodes attached to him, the mayor of Baghdad, or the district mayor of Baghdad, and all the ugly photos that was 52 photos that were seen outside of the United States. A lot of them were not seen in the U.S. And they would ask you to sign a postcard when you walked by to the UN to denounce the U.S. So we're talking at my birthday dinner, and it turns out everyone other than my then girlfriend had been tortured and placed in a stress position cage. And that was the first time I ever admitted to other people, that other than my attorney, that had happened. And so I have a chapter called Abu Ghraib. And that's one of the things that resonated between me and John, was the fact that here I was tortured in the United States. That it turns out that stress position cage was in room 136 at 850 Bryant Street in San Francisco. I don't know if it's still there now. And the only reason I know that is because that after 3 days, they would hand me my pants and throw me out into the street. Therefore, I was able to identify what building it was. And then I have to walk back barefoot, just in my pants, to the emergency room. And in San Francisco, it'd be freezing cold, wet. And I chose to go to the hospital where I'd had a ruptured appendix operation, thinking that they would know. That was over by Haight-Ashbury. So it was this huge, long walk, hoping that because I'd been admitted there before, that they would, talk to me, because I have no ID or anything. And it would be a real struggle, because here's a shirtless guy with barefoot wandering into an emergency room and can't identify himself. So it was a really sketchy situation. And then, that's one of the things that resonated between me and John, is that I was at the other end of this experience of being tortured. And, and so I do have a chapter there, and I have a picture, one of my drawing that I did of the stress position cage. I learned about the stress position cage when I was cooking with a bunch of Afghan vets who had been doing Winter Soldier in DC, and they were volunteering with us in Taos, New Mexico. I'm not clear how they got from DC to there and what the story was, but they must have had friends in Taos, and they're the ones that told me it was called a stress position cage. And it actually is in Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine. There's a description of the stress fishing cage that she writes about from the use of it in Vietnam. In the case of my co-cooks, it was Bagram. And they had 500 of those, apparently, according to this young man. So imagine all the people in the world that have had to go through that at the hands of the United States. It's like, it's pretty brutal.
But this is important because you're literally an American citizen that just gives people food, unhoused people food. And they detain you without just cause in a van, unidentified, and they take you to a location that you do not know where you're at, place you in a dark room, beat you and torture you, and then kick you out into the cold on American soil. And my question to you is, has anybody ever talked about this story? Have you ever talked to anybody, other news outlets like Democracy Now!, anybody in independent media about this particular story that you wrote in your memoir?
No, in fact, oddly enough, I've never been on Democracy Now! And I knew Amy before she became Democracy Now! So it's really interesting that I'm sort of whited out of of a lot of media. There was one point at the Republican National Convention in Tampa where I was supposed to be interviewed, but that ended up, it fell through and nothing ever happened. But no, people have never really asked me about that. Maybe now that it's I've got a chapter in my book, maybe more people will. The other thing is that, the thing that most people kind of know about, if they haven't been interviewed about this very much, but I was arrested 94 times in San Francisco for feeding people. And then I got framed on the California 3 strikes law and faced 25 to life. And when I pled out on the 3 strikes case, because they were bringing riot police into the courtroom every single court appearance, and they would increase my bail and drop my bail and increase my bail. Judges would pass it on to another judge. It was like a hot potato. People didn't really, judges were, understandably embarrassed that they had my case. And in the end, I got a drunk judge who was really cool, Lucy McCabe, and she said, "Look, they're just jerking you around. Why? It won't hardly mean anything if you plead guilty to something. Drop all the other charges, and I'll drop all the charges." So the district attorney, Arlo Smith, at the time, who was right in the position where Kamala Harris became the 2 DAs after that, my friend Terrence Hallinan became DA, and then she became DA in a corrupt election. They gave me credit for time served, 500 days. And so they estimate I did 500 days in jail for feeding people. The last bunch of them were for 45 of them were for felony conspiracy to serve food in violation of a court order. So you couldn't get bailed, even on the cases of just feeding people. And there was a total of 1,000 arrests of volunteers in San Francisco during that time. And then there's been rashes of arrests of food not bombs and other, we just had a bunch of arrests in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And tomorrow is a worldwide day of protest in solidarity of the volunteers in Tulsa who were arrested. And then this past week, the cops came and harassed them again. They didn't arrest anybody, but their trial is their arraignment's a week from tomorrow. So, but there was Tampa arrests. There's been 4 waves of a Tampa arrest. Probably there was also I was held 18 days in Orange County, which was a nightmarish jail. That was like easily one of the worst jails I've ever been in. And what was that woman, Casey Anthony or whatever, that lost her child and was found dead? Yeah. She was having her trial at the same time, and we were released at exactly the same moment, which was a very weird thing because there's all these helicopters above me. But it wasn't for me, because being arrested for feeding people was not that big of a deal apparently. So anyway, so that was the only kind of the media that was funny in that was somebody who I later find out is Commander X, this man named Chris, had been doing cyber attacks on the Orlando media, like on Buddy Dyer's campaign website and the Chamber of Commerce website and stuff. And they put up videos of me getting arrested and say, well, we're, free Keith McHenry, stop the arrest of Food Not Bombs. And so while I was in jail, they guards say, hey, do you want to interview with the media? And I had two local news stations interview me, and I had no idea what had even happened, and they would say, how are you doing this from inside a jail? And aren't you upset that all this damage you've done to Orlando? And I'm like, did somebody fall off a ladder or something and hurt themselves because of this? Because I couldn't understand why anybody, what kind of damage is there for a few hours of my picture or some video of me being arrested in Orlando. How's that, damaging? I thought that was really interesting. And Buddy Dyer called us food terrorists because of a woman I was traveling with who was doing a documentary on Food Not Bombs, which sadly has never happened, to somebody that lives in Australia. She was naming the documentary Food Terrorists, and he had signed a release to be interviewed. So there's video of him being interviewed about Food Not Bombs by my friend Liz Tadich. So Liz and I, it's also in Street. She and I were in Nigeria. I went there a couple of times, and the second time I was there, she and I both got kidnapped together, and it was like, that was a really crazy story. And they were demanding $25 million from me. And I'm like, nobody's going to pay $25 million to get me back, man. You don't know what's going on. Just because I'm white and you're the first white person you ever seen doesn't mean somebody's going to give $25 million for it. So I was with the local Food Not Bombs activists, and they went and found the people that claimed they were state police. They had these like Uzis, and they found me up in this like really trashed area of this city, way up on top of this hill. There had been a massacre the day before, and where we were kidnapped, it was still smoldering because that was during the Danish cartoon riots. And so there was a retaliatory attack where they killed 100 people at this intersection the day before that were Muslims, because I guess Christians up in Jos had were killed by Muslims in the north. And so it was weird. I didn't think I was going to get out of there alive when everything is gray and burning and smoldering. There are dead bodies around, and then the guys that did that are kidnapping you. That was very uncomfortable. But I got out of it by giving 200 Naira or $20 to the kidnapper in exchange for the key to my van, a van that I bought on the port of Lagos. And I gave another 400 Naira to the guys that claimed that they were state police if they'd take us to the Niger River and defend us with their automatic weapons until we got out of town. And so I got out really for not very much money, but boy, that was exciting. And God, when we crossed the Niger River, there was like this little gas station and a very rare patch of lawn. And all of us just got out of the van and just laid on it and go, oh my God, I can't believe we survived that. We're about to get kidnapped again later on, but I got out, ran up to them and said, hey, we were on TV, la, la, la. And they had no TV in that part of the jungle, so they didn't know whether that was true or not. And then that night, the head of transportation in Abuja, the public works, he Xeroxed off $1,000 worth of $100 bills for us so we could continue on our tour. And that worked just like a charm. We took the first Xerox 100 and got a hotel room for all of us in Abuja. Well, that's kind of stories are in my book.
Wow. Okay. So first of all, the part about Orlando and Buddy Dyer, who is still our current mayor, by the way. He's been the mayor of Orlando for 22 years now. And Buddy Dyer is a Democrat, and he decided to call you a food terrorist. That is so ironic to me that to them, terrorism is just feeding hungry people.
Yeah. I think that's a good point because so the woman that they made a law specifically to stop food not bombs, and that you could only serve in a park twice in a month or something like that. And it was so homeless people would have to chase us around. And if you're familiar with Orlando, some of the parks they allowed us serve in were almost no access to them, and they would be like an upper class, upscale neighborhood. So what 50 homeless people, 100 homeless people are going to go in that neighborhood to get a meal, and how are they going to know the schedule, right? So in the end, we serve in front of City Hall, and that's what we ended up doing. But it was so far we have not been we've been arrested in San Francisco, LA, Arcata, California, Tampa 4 times, Fort Lauderdale, which won a federal case against the Fort Lauderdale, and they had to pay, tens of thousands of dollars. They were originally supposed to pay like $2 million, but I think they got it down to like 700,000, and 750,000, and so they're all liberal Democratic towns. We've never been, and even Tulsa, that's like a liberal Democrat black mayor who's having us arrested in Tulsa. So, but Oklahoma City, we're not getting arrested. We're not getting arrested. We don't get arrested in Republican cities. They just ignore us. They don't even talk to us. The cops don't even bother us in any way. I think that's pretty interesting. And it shows that, that the threat is from the left to the Democratic Party. Because Nancy Pelosi had become, it was like in her first time as, as congressperson when we first get arrested in San Francisco. And there's a social worker, Art Agnos, who is the mayor. And then so Willie Brown becomes involved in harassing us. There's all these people that are the top of the liberal Democratic class in the United States were directly involved. And I ended up homeless in Kansas City after the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee got shut down, ultimately by the FBI. And so I ended up on the streets, and I had a membership with the YMCA, so I would take a shower. So I was riding my bike, and this woman runs out from her house as I'm on my way to the Y, and thinking their house is on fire. So I go and check it out for her, and she has to be helped. And it turns out it's it was a diesel truck, and it was idling behind her house, filling her house up with smoke. So she asked me out on a date. I'm like, wow, that's great. And then, so we walk around this lake, and I tell her about Food Not Bombs, just tell her the normal, what I was doing. And then I get a call after Thanksgiving from her, and I go, wow, this really attractive head of nursing at KU wants to go on a second date. Wow, that's never happened. So I take her to a fancy vegan restaurant in the plaza, and she says, I had Thanksgiving dinner with Nancy Pelosi. Our family's been having dinner with her for years. Thanksgiving, every year for a long time. And I told her about meeting you. And she said, oh, he's lying to you. He's a terrorist. And the funniest thing about that experience was the waiter at the end, he comes out and he goes, Mr. McHenry, we're so honored that you chose our restaurant to bring your date. And we have agreed as a staff to not charge you any money, to gift you this meal, and because we're so honored that you came here. And her face just like sunk. Now, years later, I get the impression that was, I have so much experience, and when you read Soup Street, you'll see how many times this kind of thing happens. She probably, the authority, the FBI knew that I rode that route every day. Right, and and this woman was probably working with them, and she intentionally ran out to see me, and she intentionally ended up having this date, and she intentionally, because all along she knew Pelosi, so it's possible, like a lot of the other honey traps that have happened in my life. It was a setup of some nature that was somehow to send a message, or something like that. because that's then the woman that I ended up marrying around that time ended up being a honey trap, and I lost everything that I had. And after 9/11, I lost the house that she and I bought together. I became homeless. I ended up being the injuries that I had from the torture became really severe fibromyalgia, and I ended up living on this in the back of my truck for quite some time. I essentially very, rarely got housing after that for years and years, and lived mostly in my truck or in vans and did tours for Food Not Bombs, and that's how I lived my life for much of it. And so there's a lot more that goes on. I have a lot of humorous law enforcement related chapters. So when I did have an apartment before I became the director of the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, I was living with someone that was active in the IRA, and I was living also with Bobby Castile from the American Indian Movement, who had been in prison with Marion Control Unit with Leonard. And so one day I pick up my phone, which I'd paid the bill for 10 years for, and it said, please deposit 35 cents. And I'm like, this is a little princess phone. Where am I going to put the 35 cents? I've been paying this bill for all these years. So then I keep calling, phone repair. They say, no, it's definitely a pay phone. And at some point, I, oddly enough, had become friends with the person who had become chief of police of the San Francisco Police Department, named Fred Lau. So I call up. He'd said, like, if there's anything you need, just give me a call. So I call his office, and the secretary puts me right through. And I go, Fred, I know that no one wiretaps phones in America or anything like that, but just because I knew the phone was being wiretapped. And so, but I'm having this problem where my phone's become a payphone. I was wondering if you could check it out. So a white van comes with ladders on the top, and the guy climbs up to the light pole outside the apartment I was living in, the flat I was living in, and the garage doors come up in the house across the street, and there's two men in there with sports coats and ties and headphones, and one of the guys makes like hand signals to the dude on the pole, and then after a little bit, he comes down off the pole and drives away. And one of the guys making the hand signals, he gets up and he pushes a button and the garage door goes down. So I go into my phone and it works. Well, and I realized, there's a payphone at the corner. And while they're wiretapping my phone, because I also have a wiretap memo, which I referred to in Soup Street from October. Well, that one was, it's about an event that happened October 15th, 88, but where I get beat up. And in that case, I get this wiretap memo where they say I've got 3,000 people. I'm going to take over the Army base and all this stuff. And it's like on September 27th of 88. And there's this anti-war protest that we're having for tall ships on October 15th. And I'm just bringing food to it. I wasn't a part of the organizing group, but they're kind of claiming I am organizing. And they claim that I'm going to have a bigger crowd this year than last year. Well, I didn't go the year before. I was hiding from the mafia at the time. So anyway, they had a double at this woman, Ellen, it was right when video camcorders came out, and she got video of this whole action and there's this man dressed just exactly like me with a beard just like me, taking the police barricades and throwing it at the military police. And so I get arrested for throwing police barricades at the police. And but you can see in the video that I didn't do anything except for serve food and then try to pack up my stuff when the cops grabbed me and beat the crap out of me. And the wiretap memo is like a lead up to that. So it's these are the kind of things that happen if you're organizing, but I don't think people should be intimidated just because these kind of things happen. Because it's such a rewarding life, as you'll see in pages of my book. I've just had an amazing amount of fun, it's something really to be proud of. And I've gotten to, oddly enough, see the world as a result. So all things I would have never happened if it hadn't been that I was just had made that dedication when I was 16 that I was going to do whatever it took to change the society that was willing to desecrate the Hopi land.
Wow. Man, Mr. Keith, man, you got so many great stories, and these stories are really just a lesson for a lot of us. And I implore everybody to get this book. Now, you have it uploaded completely for free, but I implore everybody to support, your activists. If you can afford it, please make sure to make a purchase of the book. I put the link in the description as well as also in the chat for you guys too. And so this is one of those ones where it may not be on the New York Times bestseller list, but just because it's a bestseller doesn't mean it's the best written or the most compelling. And so because it's based on a system that rewards people for, their profits instead of, the stories that they tell. So just, take a look and start reading. And you wrote this very beautifully, by the way. You have a gift for writing. And so I just want to say thank you for your activism as well as your encouragement for us who are wet behind the ears trying to navigate our way through this process and making things better. So
the biggest complaint I get about my book is that people can't put it down, and people have been late for work, or people ended up staying up till 3 a.m. because they couldn't put it down. So that's a real good, I'm glad that you identified it as a well-written book. I did a lot of, I read this one book on memoir writing over and over and over again while I was writing this. I started this originally in 2003, but I thought, no, I'm too young to have a memoir. And then in 2017, I took a workshop with a author named Nick Flynn. Everybody quit the workshop on the first day but me. And it turned out his memoir was Another Bullshit Night in Suck City. And it turned out he and I had parallel lives in Boston at the same time. And he used to joke, I dated one of the Food Not Bombs women, but all I got was clap. I hope that's not true, but he used to joke about that. And he helped me serve food and stuff while, after the workshop, we'd come down to Santa Cruz and serve food.
Wow.
So anyway, that was a very inspiring, and the chapter called Am I Keith or Am I Keith was inspired by that week-long workshop. And I really think Nick got me started on, and then I did a writing workshop, book completion workshop with Andy of the opening, and I did that for the whole last 7 years or so, once a week. So
yeah, guys, the book is called Soup Street, a memoir by Food Not Bombs co-founder Keith McHenry. Guys, go ahead and get it. There's a link there that says buy a copy of Soup Street here. You don't have to go through Amazon. You don't have to go through some big corporate seller. It's right there for you to purchase instantly. Go ahead and grab it while you can. Mr. Keith McHenry, it is always a pleasure and it is always a joy to have you and to glean and pick your brain about what has happened before and how we can actually move forward and doing this activism work. I appreciate you coming on so very much.
No, thank you, James, so much. Beautiful. I look forward to coming back.
Yeah, I look forward to having you back.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone out there.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was Mr. Keith McHenry, co-founder of Food Not Bombs. thank you guys so very much for staying for that segment. I think that was a really important one for people to listen in on, because in order to know where we're going, we also have to know where we come from. And also, a lot of these lessons can be gleaned from so that we can navigate this system a little bit better. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so appreciative of him coming on. Guys, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much. So we may be able to move through this stream fairly quickly and on time. I want to also give attention to the patrons on Patreon so that we are able to thank them, and then we will move on to a short segment in between. And then once he is ready, we will be also having on Chairman Omali Yeshitela from the African People's Socialist Party to be on as well in about half an hour or so. So let's get into this. So let me share the screen so we can acknowledge. Wait, hold on. I think I did something wrong. Okay. Okie dokie. It'll probably come up now. Yes, there we go. Here are the tiers to all the patrons on Patreon. Let's thank them, guys. We have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters. We have Super Jaybefaunters. Then we have Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And thank you to all the new members: Helen Hooper Butt, Mark Nagy, Elisa Gray, and Ronald Hilliard. I hope I did not mispronounce your name. If I did, my apologies. Thank you so very much for becoming patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. You guys make this channel run. If you guys would like to, you guys can also become patrons on Patreon. Or if you guys would like to support the channel in other ways, there's memberships, super chats, as well, and a Cash App link down in the description. So let's move on into, let's say hello to some of the people in the chat. I'm just going to be covering primarily super chats because I know people spend their hard-earned money, but I will be doing more chats once the chairman exits as well, because I want to be respectful of his time once he comes in. So we're going to do this really quick. I'm going to check to see if we have any gifted subs on Kick. If we do, then great. We will cover that. As of right now, we see gifted subs. I think that was from last week, so I think we're good there. Let's check on the Rumble side to make sure that we're good on Rumble. I hope you guys are doing well today too, by the way. We're good on Rumble. All right, good. All right, so I do know we have some super chats on the YouTube side. So let's get to these right now. Okay, so we have 2 super chats so far. We have Roger Meadows. Thank you so very much for this. He said, ask Santa Claus if he'd be willing to run a CBI amendment to decommodify housing as an Xmas present. Santa Claus, Roger, you will not let that go. He is a very jolly person, and he is very happy, which is one of the things I admire about Mr. McHenry. But yes, that is actually a really good question. I wish I was able to ask it of him, but due to the sake of time, I wasn't able to. But maybe he's still watching. He can probably address that next time he comes on. A CBI amendment to decommodify housing would be a benefit to the working class, definitely. Thank you so very much for this, Roger. He says, can you explain to me what is this membership gifting? So essentially, you're paying for, I think it's like a month membership, but you can do it for multiple people. I think membership starts at like I think it's like $3.99, so basically $4. So let's say you want to gift like 3 memberships. So you would spend $12, and then it would automatically go to 3 different people so that they can have a month membership. And if they want to continue the membership, they can continue on their own. If they don't, then it's just a 12-month. Sorry, it's a $12 that gives 3 people a month membership. I think that's what it is. But thank you so very much for that. And to everybody that's watching, I will get to the rest of you guys towards the end of the stream. Thank you so very much to all of you guys who are joining in now. All right, so let's get into the next one because I want to make sure that I am making good on time. And so, of course, we talked to Mr. Keith McHenry, where he does basically a tell-all. There was a lot there that we went over, especially in regards to torture and honeypots and sabotage by the alphabet agencies. But now we're going to be talking about no security, and this has to do with what's going on here in Orlando, SeaWorld Orlando. We're going to be talking about how they are making their parks unsafe. Let's get into this. So SeaWorld is making their parks unsafe for people who come to visit, and it's all because they do not want to pay their security guards what would be a livable wage. Welcome to the show. Guys, this is a story that has recently came out that I think that everybody needs to pay attention to. Next time you go to any one of the theme parks in Orlando, just a reminder, number one, service workers, please make sure to treat them with the utmost respect because they are not being paid a living wage. They're paying a starvation wage. And on top of it, they are also not just fighting against being treated fairly by customers, but also the people that employ them. Let's get into this, this article that really has recently came out. And so this is out of Orlando Weekly. It says they keep SeaWorld visitors safe. They're fighting for safety on the job themselves. The blurb says security guards at SeaWorld unionized last year to address low pay and understaffing. SeaWorld has refused to meet them halfway at the bargaining table. So let's get into this. Now, everybody knows SeaWorld, the place where they have Shamu, the orcas or the killer whales, as they used to be called. And let's go into this. So let's get right here. It says, but at SeaWorld, the low pay for security guards, $16.50 an hour, makes it difficult for the company to recruit and retrain trained officers. The last time guards received a raise was 6 years ago, a consolation prize provided by SeaWorld after the guards' first attempt to unionize during the pandemic. So $16.50 an hour, just to let people know exactly what the pay rate here is in not Central Florida, but all of Florida. The pay rate in Florida is $14 an hour. Now, we passed a citizen ballot initiative which raises our rates to $15 an hour by September of 2026. So by this September, all minimum wage across the entire state has to be set at $15 an hour. So if you're making $16.50, that means you're basically near minimum wage, which is a starving wage. Now, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Out of Reach report, which is typically released every July or so every single year, in the 2025 year, they actually listed that you needed to make $37.27 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental in the state of Florida. In 2024's National Low Income Housing Coalition Out of Reach report, for Orlando, which SeaWorld is in, it was the 5th most expensive city in the state of Florida. I think it dropped down to about number 6 for 2025. It could jump back up to number 5 or even number 4 at the rate that we're going right now because Orlando is expanding. Our population is growing because a lot of people are moving away from these states from up north and down to the south, and they want to go to the major population centers. Major population centers like Jacksonville, Tampa, you have Fort Lauderdale, Miami, places like that, West Palm, and what have you. And so a lot of places, a lot of these population centers are now having an influx of more people. With that influx, you also have higher rates. And so this is one of the things that a lot of people do not realize, that you now have security guards that can't even afford to live within the city of Orlando. Now, it says, they said, oh, we're going to treat you better. Oh, we're going to, make your job safer, have better equipment. That's one of the security guards said that management was telling them. But they said, but since then, nothing. So it says the stagnant pay and difficulty with retention has led to understaffing and is thereby increased safety risks, not only for visitors to the park, but also for the guards themselves. So our supervisor is getting strung out because we just don't have enough bodies, and we're worried that, a mistake is going to happen. Here's the thing about corporations, right? And SeaWorld is actually owned by a larger corporation, which owns Aquatica, Busch Gardens, and other parks. One of the first things to also always go, for the most part, is safety, because safety costs money. And so in order for these corporations to retain more profits, they will put safety, they will lay it by the wayside. And so that means also underpaying people who are paid to keep you safe. And this is not just a safety for the residents. SeaWorld is essentially a large zoo / aquarium. And so this also means keeping the animals safe as well. And the problem is, like, that safety, if it's not there, would you be willing to go to SeaWorld if safety was a larger hazard? You have big animals there, animals that weigh thousands of pounds, not just seals, walruses. You have these orcas, these killer whales. You have sharks. You have stingrays. Discovery Cove has dolphins. At SeaWorld, you have dolphins. You have all these things. Aquatica. I mean, what about as far as people being subject to water and drowning and things like that? So you have so many different issues. Excuse me, so many different issues. And so keeping people safe should be the top priority. But really, with the people who own these corporations, the safety is not the top priority. It's the money in your pockets that's the top priority, but safety goes by the wayside. Now, let's continue on here. We're going to get into deeper about the affordability crisis here in the state of Florida within Orlando. And so here's something that I've actually been chiming about since, especially now that I also have a job outside of my channel. But here it says, Michelle Smith, a fellow security guard, said guards who are forced to pick up the slack are, quote, basically doing a job of 2 people, and you're only getting paid 1 salary. Now, all the people who are listed here had to use a pseudonym to protect their identity because they are afraid of retaliation, which should be illegal within the state of Florida. But as we know, the state of Florida favors corporations over workers. So, of course, they have to use a pseudonym anyway. But yes, so this is what we call the quiet hiring, because a lot of these companies will say, oh, well, everybody's hiring now. They actually need workers, when in reality, they're not hiring. They're putting up listings to make it look like they're hiring. And then they're keeping those applications on file. And then they essentially put workers, they stretch them as far as they can. And then when those workers leave, they just pick up another application and go, hey, here's a job. And so then that worker ends up just taking the same starvation wage, because for them, workers are just, you just swap them out like spark plugs. You just swap them out. No need to protect them. No need to safeguard them. Just retrain them and boom, stick them where you need them, because they are replaceable. And so that's what they do with workers now. And then they operate these skeleton crews because they don't want to pay as much. And this is across the board in many different industries within this country because we live in a capitalist system. And capitalism requires infinite growth when a planet with finite resources. That infinite growth also means that they stretch the workforce as thin as they possibly can while still being able to get away with making as much profit as possible. Let's continue on here. It says, although firing, disciplining, or otherwise retaliating against workers for advocating for better wages or working conditions is unlawful under the National Labor Relations Act, research has found that nearly 1/3 of employers involved in union drives do so anyway. So, it talks about how Seaworld wasn't able to give workers a raise even though they formed a union back during the pandemic. Let's continue on here. It says the guards, unsatisfied with their working conditions, again petitioned the Federal Labor Board for an election to unionize with security, police, and fire professionals of America last year. The second time they are successful, they became the first group of workers in Seaworld Orlando history to vote in favor of forming a union. But since then, Ellis said the company has played hardball because they don't like the workers. They do not want workers to have power. And so they went through multiple security directors, as noted here. So they Orlando Weekly reached out to Seaworld, and they said they had multiple allegations, including safety concerns, unlawful firings, and retaliation for organizing. It says neither Seaworld nor this parent company responded to a weekly inquiry ahead of publication. So they have all these unfair labor practices. People are being forced and stretched thin, and there's an interesting part that I want to push here because this is one of the reasons why this is happening as well. It says, indeed, in 2025, United Parks and Resorts, which is Seaworld's parent company, announced a $500 million in stock buybacks for its stockholders, citing a strong balance sheet. So ultimately, this is who they care about. This is who they care about the most: the stockholders, the shareholders. The CEO has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders, not to any one person who is a stakeholder within the company. So, so they own or license across the US and Abu Dhabi, SeaWorld, Busch Gardens, Discovery Cove, Aquatica, and Adventure Island. So, also, there was disability violations, workplace injuries, also death of a trainer, animal abuse, and all this. And one of the things that I wanted to point out towards the end was this, because I think this tells you exactly who Seaworld really is. Let me make sure I get to it. There was a point. Here we go. It says, according to the SPFPA union rep, who requested her name not be included in our story, Seaworld recently joined a host of other high-profile companies, such as Amazon and Trader Joe's, that are claiming the nearly centuries-old National Labor Relations Board is unconstitutional. So I want people to realize who these companies are, that they do not care about the workers. They do not care about making sure that they are, being treated fairly. And when we talk about companies like SeaWorld, Disney, Amazon, Trader Joe's, name any company, any large company within the state of Florida, they are going to look out for their bottom line before anybody else. And it gets so bad that there is actually an article that has come out and that I would be sharing in a second, that you have to make at least $70,000 in Orlando in order to comfortably afford a 1-bedroom apartment. And this came out last year. So this is one of the issues why I think it's so important that we purse through this, because ultimately we need to do as much as we can to help out the workers as much as possible, especially in regards to, what they're being put through. I will continue this segment a little bit later. We have Chairman Omali Yeshitela already here, and I would love to be respectful of his time so that we can get this in, so that he can make the announcement for everyone. Chairman, if you are ready, give me a thumbs up if you are currently ready. Okay. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be showing this here. Of course, we talked to Mr. Keith McHenry. We touched partially on the no security in regards to Seaworld, but now we're going to be talking about the Uhuru 3 versus the Department of Justice. This is going to be very important, guys. I want you guys to really hone in on this one. We're going to be talking about how the battle continues, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela joins me live here. Chairman Omali Yeshitela, so good to have you here back.
Thank you so much, brother JB. It's good to be here, and it's good to have access to this platform to talk about this ongoing struggle that we're involved in, because it's a struggle that's bigger than the Uhuru 3, bigger than Omali Yeshitela, and much of the future of our ability to really continue advancing the cause of liberation for Africans and other oppressed peoples around the world, and the interests of the working class revolves around the outcome of this, the immediate outcome of these oral arguments that we'll be attending to, participating in Atlanta shortly, July 22nd in Atlanta.
Yeah, so in July 22nd, which is in about a week, about 8 days from now, you're going to be in Atlanta during a hearing, basically to the last really remnants of this battle between you and the Department of Justice. Now, this started under the Biden Justice Department, and people recognize Biden as a Democrat, but now it's continuing under the Trump Department of Justice, as we see right now, and they are continuing to try to hinder your free speech. You, as part of the Uhuru 3, you, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville, if you can please discuss what is left for them to try to get you on, because these are really just trumped up charges that, have largely been vanquished, but they're trying to grasp at straws now.
Well, the fact is that they're very serious charges, first of all, that they manufactured and laid on us for speaking. And they charged us being Russian agents because we were demanding reparations, because we were demanding that the United States be taken before the World Court because of its assault on the anti-genocide convention that was passed in 1948, because we were showing solidarity with the Russian state in opposition to the assault that was been made against Russia through the Ukraine war. I mean, of course, the struggle against Russia, the attack on Russia, is more than 100 years old, as you know, coming from the United States. And the United States, along with 7 other colonial powers, including Japan, actually invaded Russia in 1918 after the 1917 socialist revolution that occurred there. And there's never been a time where they have not been attempting to undermine Russia, even when you saw things emerge like the United Nations, the Atlantic Bloc, the NATO. All of this had to do with an ongoing struggle against Russia to contain Russia or destroy Russia when it was possible. So that continues up to now, even though Russia no longer claims to be anything like a socialist state, except in fact, in many ways, you can characterize it as an anti-socialist state. But it has, it functions even now to frustrate some of the ambitions by the US and other colonial powers around the world. So they claim that we did an interview, we hosted an interview on our radio with somebody from Russia to talk about the real situation that was surrounding Ukraine, because only thing we could hear is what was coming from CNN and other outlets, etc. We had no opportunity to hear anything that was coming from Russia, etc. And they characterized Russia, as an adversary. So we allowed somebody from Russia to speak to what their interpretation of that reality. Then I was in Russia. I was in Russia in 1915. I went to Moscow twice. I went there to attend international conferences dealing with issues of national liberation for peoples around the world. And this was when the US determined that I became a Russian agent when I went to Moscow on those two occasions. And of course, I mean, it was totally fabrication, but that's what they did. So they tried us on two charges, one punishable by 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, which was being a Russian agent, working as a Russian agent without, as a foreign agent without notifying the Justice Department or the Attorney General. That was one. And then the second offense, punishable by 5 years and $250,000 fine, they charged us with was conspiring to work as a foreign agent without notifying the Attorney General. So that a total of 15 years we were facing when we went to trial. We went to trial something like they didn't even indict us for 9 years, 9 months, I should say, 9 months after a pre-dawn raid on our homes and offices in St. Petersburg, Florida, and here where I'm located now in St. Louis, Missouri. So 9 months, we were characterized as unindicted co-conspirators. So we went through this 9-month period where the government was planning to do these things to us, and people knew it. They were able to gather who it was they were attacking because they saw the news articles and things like this. But we couldn't go to court. We couldn't say, hey, make the United States government say what it is that we have been charged with, make the United States government say that all of this is fabricated, etc., because we had no legal standing, because we hadn't been charged. So there's no charge, but this thing is around our necks for 9 months. And then 9 months later, we go to Tampa, Florida for indictment. Me, Penny Hess, Jesse Neville, where we are mugshot. Their mugshots are done, fingerprinted, and put in leg irons, and chains and leg irons. And part of this is a thing of humiliating me and our followers, etc., bringing down low the leader of the movement, etc., is part of what this was all about. So this is the thing that we face. And then we went to court, and in court we didn't produce a single witness. The government was not able to present a single human being. They brought 12 persons from the FBI to testify, and they brought 2 Russian experts, none of whom had ever met us. And the thing was embarrassing in some ways, because under cross-examination, all of the FBI agents say that what they charged us with is stuff we've been doing now for the last 50 years. They say they looked at all of our records. They said what they charged us with is nothing new. That there was no evidence that we were working for Russians. This is what their FBI agents said. There was no evidence that we were working for the Russians, etc. So we, our defense was not, putting up any witnesses, but we had incredible lawyers, I should say, incredible lawyers who recognized with us that this was not a case of legal stuff, except they were using the law to pursue political objectives. And so we treated it like what it was. It's a political case. We had one of the lawyers when, in its opening statement, walked up in federal court in Tampa, Florida, threw his fist up in the air and went, "Uhuru, Uhuru," 3 times. Said, "You're going to be hearing this a lot during this case." Where Uhuru means freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We had another lawyer who represented us who said that Omali Yeshitela, Omali Yeshitela is a revolutionary. He can't be bought, right? And then this incredible lawyer also, who was the one who wrote the paper for dismissal, the statement for dismissal of the case. We had this incredible team of lawyers. We didn't run from the charges in the sense of who we were. We didn't say, "Wow, we're really innocent people who are just, got our papers into the Democratic Party and they just haven't accepted us yet," anything like that. We said Uhuru. We said we are revolutionaries. And then lawyers got them to allow entry into evidence, the testimony, the videos. They videoed me when I was in Moscow. And when I was in Moscow, I was being through a video. They showed I was being spoken to, interviewed by people there, and they asked why I was there, and I said we are here to win support for Black people, so that everybody can understand what the hell is happening to Black people, because we're isolated, and we want to end the fact that we are surrounded and isolated. I mean, everything they heard, that we were what we stood for. They interviewed, they showed videos of a thing that we had done. We followed the United Nations, who were traveling throughout the United States under the leadership of Fanon's daughter, the daughter of Frantz Fanon, who they were investigating conditions of African people in this country. So we were in Chicago with them. We were in Jackson, Mississippi with them. We were in Washington, D.C., and New York City with them. We went all these places with them, and we were in tents. It was freezing weather. We had tents, et cetera, that we had set up, and then we spoke at these rallies where Fanon was, sometimes with hundreds of people in attendance, like in Chicago. And we said, "This is what we are. This is what and they allowed some of this stuff to be shown to the jury. This was part of what won the case. I mean, we let people see what we stand for. We didn't run from it. We didn't hide from it, etc. We said, "This is who we are. This is what we stand for." And we also said that we went into this recognizing that our objective was not to win the court, to recognize the fact that being a revolutionary is a good thing, or being an African internationalist is a good thing. We went to court and was saying that according to the US Constitution, according to the First Amendment, I have the right to advance these ideas and things that I'm doing, etc. So I'm not trying to win you to these ideas. I'm telling you that I have the right according to what you say. That was not my Bill of Rights. You understand? That was the Bill of Rights that was imposed on me. So this is the way we took the case. And so the jury went, they expected, they said this trial to last something like a month. It lasted maybe 8 days, counting the weekends. And the jury retired, and it came back the next day with a non-guilty verdict on the question of being Russian agents, which was more or less a statement that the only ones that we worked for was Black people. And then, and so then they came back with this inconsistent thing by saying that while we were not guilty of working for the Russians without notifying the Attorney General. We were guilty of thinking about working for the Russians without notifying the Attorney General. So it's a thought crime. So this is the conspiracy. They didn't require us to do anything. And so this is what we are now going to refute in this in the hearings that on the 22nd of this month. This is what we're going to have oral arguments to deal with that question on the 22nd of this month. Yeah.
Chairman, it's so weird. It's like unofficial co-conspirators. It's like, how can you conspire with somebody when they don't even know you're conspiring with them? It doesn't make any sense.
And that was part of the argument that we're making.
Look, Chairman, I'm about to get really black up in here. It's like, do we look like Boo Boo the Fool to you? Like, what in the world are they talking about? It is weird because, and the thing is, like, they're trying to throw whatever spaghetti against the wall to make sure it sticks. And it's like, it doesn't stick because it's like, just like you said. Oh gosh, it was I don't know if it was on my channel or if it was a speech you made, but you said that what you're speaking about is something you've been speaking about for, since you've been in activism, and a lot of us have been speaking about, is that we didn't come to this position because we were influenced by some other government. We came to this position because of what the United States government has done to us.
That's who influenced us. I mean, who would be more for freedom of speech than African people, for whom the Bill of Rights could not have actually been written for, because we were property. In 1797, when the Bill of Rights were ratified by the United States government, free speech, First Amendment, all this stuff, it wasn't written for us. So we were always in the position of trying to have the right to speak. You've seen the pictures of enslaved Africans with the iron things over our faces so that we couldn't talk and stuff like that. And we know Emmett Till, they murdered Emmett Till because they said that he whistled at a white woman. So free speech is something that's never been accessible to us. We are the ones who've been on the forefront of the struggle for democratic rights in this country. And so it's and part of what they've done, of course, the problem is that they cannot allow the statements that we're having to be made freely because their position is that America is this great country, always has been, that's struggling. It's the great democracy that's struggling against what do they call it? In Russia and all these other places, autocracy. So if America is this great democracy, how do you explain what's happening to African people? Well, nothing is happening to African people, and the only reason there seems to be there's something said about it is not because something has happened to African people, but because Russia told them to say this. So we have no agency as a people.
It's wild. Yeah. So if we have no agency, then why are you indicting us for something that we have no control over?
Yeah. Well, they indicted the Russian too. They indicted the Russian too. But the Russian is in Russia, and they didn't go to St. Petersburg, Russia. They went to St. Petersburg, Florida, to attack. Right. And that's the worst GPS since Columbus. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how they've done this. So that they say that, and this is extremely problematic because the only reason they would do this is because there's a presumption that prevails in this country that supports the notion that African people do not have agency. That if we have this conclusion, it's easy for them to say the Russians or somebody white told us to say it, because that's how they understand us. That's the narrative that they have contrived, that we don't have the ability to come to conclusions on our own. And so if the United States is not giving us this explanation of reality, the only explanation of reality that we can go with is the one that's been imposed on us by the government.
Yeah. You know, I think it's heartening the fact that you have Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, two people who are white that realize their privilege within this country, that are also helping to because nobody can give you a voice because you already have one, but they're trying to amplify it by using their privilege, which I applaud. And helping Black people in this country. And one of the things that I was thinking about, especially over the July 4th weekend, was that when we are educated in the accurate sense about our nation's history, we do not subscribe to whatever type of fantasy that is presented to us about this American exceptionalism, because if that was the case, then we would have been free from the beginning. But we're not. And I mean, the 13th Amendment still allows for slavery. And so I look at it as what you're going through is really just a continuous, extension of a 400-year struggle that we have been going through. And one of my questions is, for a lot of us who are on the left, particularly those of us who are Black, and seeing what you're going through as the Uhuru 3, how do we continue this fight without feeling dejected on a day-to-day basis? Because to us, you have a fire and vigor that I can only wish I could dream of having. So what motivation can we have, or what advice can you give those of us on the left to have that same drive and vigor that you have, that you've had for such a long time?
Let me just say, Carmen, I really appreciate the question. I wanted to just step back and look at something else that you mentioned. And the point is, from our perspective, one of the difficulties is in understanding what the struggle is about in the United States and how that relates to struggles all around the world, and the nature of the social system itself. People have been able to unite with fighting against the capitalist mode of production. But most people, and that's where most progressives, that's where people, whether they characterize it in that fashion or not, they're moving with a presumption of a struggle against the capitalist mode of production. Mode of production, that is to say, the system within which production and reproduction of life occurs in society. And it all happens within systems. It's not just like randomly out there. Systems, even though we have a tendency to, and most people do, have a tendency to experience that as just something that's happening in our neighborhood, on our job, or whether we got a job or not, or the police mess with us here. Don't necessarily recognize there's a mode of production. And the mode of production, we say, is not that we are fighting against, is not the capitalist mode of production as such. It is a colonial mode of production. And the colonial mode of production is that which gave birth to capitalism itself. You cannot even begin to imagine capitalism without the enslavement of African people. You cannot begin to imagine capitalism, you mentioned it earlier, without the theft of this land right here and I don't mean just the United States, I mean everything that's characterized as the Americas. There was no such thing as the Americas, was no such thing as Europe, etc., until 600 years ago when Portugal went to Africa and began the process of kidnapping African people and dispersing us forcibly around the world. And then with us, of course, we took the oppression and exploitation that was happening, and we've been fighting against it in various places all around the world. And the social system came from that. In fact, Karl Marx defined it. He said something to the effect that in order to understand and explain capitalism, you have to understand where it comes from. And he says that it had to do, and he called this a primitive accumulation of capital, because you got to understand, everybody knows if a capitalist, you have to have some startup capital. That's not like manna from heaven that, suddenly you know how to do stuff, you have the resources to do it. He called this a primitive accumulation of capital that was not the consequence of capitalist production, but it was a starting point. And he said that was like, among other things, the attack that was made on the East Indies, talking about India and all of that particular area. He said it had to do with interring the indigenous people in the Americas, the so-called aboriginals in the mines who brought up silver and gold, etc., and turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. He said this must be understood. It has the same significance in political economy, this thing that he's calling primitive accumulation, as original sin in theology. This is the starting point. What he's defining as primitive accumulation is colonialism. India, the indigenous peoples here, the attack on Africa and African people here, and we're still living with that right now. Nothing has changed. We're still living with that right now. And so, and capitalism functions on that base. Sometimes people can advance in a capitalist situation. In fact, people have been stymied trying to understand how, with the predictions that capitalism is going to go all these kinds of ways, how is it that we see capitalism still able to survive, but the masses of people all around the world? I mean, look at it's a parasitic social system that sucks blood, resources, etc., from the colonizers of the world, whether those colonizers are in Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Africa, North St. Louis, Brooklyn, New York, etc. It's the same social system, and we engage in the same struggle. And white people are tied to this too. And in most instances, it's difficult for them to recognize this because there's a benefit as the colonizers on the capitalist pedestal of the oppression of the rest of us. There's a benefit, it appears, even though that's temporary, because the fact is that the real struggle is the struggle against the colonial mode of production. And this has been the fundamental contradiction we've seen with revolution in this country and around the world. And the weak link in the revolution has been white people. The unwillingness, the inability of white people who are colonizers. I'm not characterizing them as some racial national. I'm not a race nationalist, but I'm characterizing them because that's how they have been defined and participating in defining themselves as colonizers. Mm-hmm. Not all of them. I'm talking about, the ruling class, has done this and adopted this. And so it's very difficult for an American to unite against colonialism. They didn't do it with the Black Panther Party. They didn't do it with the movement. They didn't do it with Garvey. They never united with the struggle against colonialism. It's only at those times where the crisis crept into, obviously, into the ability of the colonizers themselves to advance, that they became extraordinarily concerned. Fascism is one of the things that we hear often. We don't hear it now, often. Fascism, combat fascism, fascism. Colonialism is the question, because what they characterize as fascism is those elements of colonialism that seem to seep into the society of Europeans, whether in this country or around the world. That's the question of fascism. So Trump is a fascist, but Biden is the one who attacked us here. Clinton is the one. Kennedy is the one who created the Green Berets and even how they look and dressed, et cetera, et cetera. And both the Republicans and Democrats, the Democratic Kennedy and the Republican Eisenhower, participated in hunting down and murdering Patrice Lumumba. So this is the whole history. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the great liberal, the civil rights guy, the Great Society, etc., is the one who organized the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah. This is the history that we are talking about. So all of this, there's no such thing. You have a right-wing colonizer and a left-wing colonizer. Whichever one you got colonialism. And so colonialism has to go, and that's the struggle that we're making with the white leftists, people who call themselves leftists, communists, etc. We say the road to socialism is painted black. The black that Malcolm X talked about when he talked about the difference in the Black Revolution and the Negro Revolution. This Black Revolution, he said, was happening. You saw it happening in places like Cuba. You saw it happening in Vietnam. You saw it happening. This is the Black Revolution, the oppressed peoples of the world. So I just, that's, I know I spoke a lot on that, but that's how we understand this whole movement of history right now that we are entangled in. Look at where all the struggles are happening. Look at where all of the closest we've come to anything that approximates socialism. Russia was pushed into it in 1920s. What was significant about 1917, the Russian Revolution? What else was significant about that time frame? Garvey. Garvey was significant, and the struggle against colonialism that Garvey had initiated, so all around the world, had maybe up to 11 million black people around the world, in Africa, throughout the Americas, in India even, associated with the struggle against colonialism. And what was it that made Lenin and the Bolsheviks significant? Their refusal to participate in the World War I, and this war, etc., that the other colonizers wanted them to participate in. They refused. It was Trotsky who exposed the Balfour Declaration, the Russian revolutionary. What was the Balfour Declaration? It was giving Palestine to European Jews. I mean, the whole struggle, look at it where it's happened. Algeria, Cuba, Venezuela, all of these places is where you see the revolution happening, and the closest approximation of socialism is happening these places, and that's where the real support needs to come from. So this is what we have to impose, in my view, the white left. I mean, I'm not looking for allies in that sense. I'm not looking for people who love us. I believe the road to socialism is painted black. I truly believe that. I believe that I can prove it historically. I believe that everything that I've said to you right now can be backed up scientifically. So it's not just some race nationalism that I'm spouting. And an honest left would have to concentrate on uniting with the struggle against colonialism. And we exist not just in this country, the African People's Socialist Party. We are in Africa. We have a magnificent movement throughout Southern Africa. We have a magnificent, when I say Southern Africa, I'm talking about in various provinces in South Africa. I'm talking about Namibia. We are also in Ghana. We're in Nigeria. We're in various other places like that because it's one revolutionary movement. But we also have opened up a front through the Hands Off Uhuru movement in Latin America. There's a Latin America front that's there. We're in Ecuador. You know, we're working in Ecuador, even as we have, not just in Ecuador. We're talking about what's been characterized as the jungles of Ecuador, with the indigenous people who are there. And they are able to unite with the basic line that we are talking about right now. So I've said a lot about that, but that's how we perceive the world. And that's the thing that informs our practice and how it is that we're moving. Uhuru. Says,
yeah.
Man, have I used up all the time?
No. I always got time for you, Chairman. In fact, you actually touched on the question, and I'm not trying to deviate too far from your original message here about the
go where you want to go. Yeah.
But one of the things that is a big question that has been, especially online, a lot, and I would love to glean your thoughts from this, is that there is a lot of people who say there's no war but class war. And whenever you start to talk about the different identities that intersect with class, they don't want to discuss it. And then we start to see microaggressions and anti-blackness on the left. And this, I would like to get your thoughts about that, because there's a lot of people who seem to think that they should only be a class reductionist. Because I get, I have my critiques for the race reductionists, because of course they don't incorporate class into their analysis. But for the class reductionists, they don't want to see the intersections of different identities along with class. And so it feels like we're constantly in this limbo instead of actually movement building. If you can correct me on that.
There's no limbo. The fact is that the class question is concentrated in the colonial question. The class question is concentrated in the colonial contradiction. That's where the class question is. And if you will look at the class issues, what does that mean? That everybody in the world is trying to make revolution. Everybody can unite around the colony. Look at what happened. We've seen all the way back to Bandung in 1955, I think it was, with China. And all kinds of countries came together in Indonesia. That resulted in 1960, I think, the CIA helping to kill 1 million Indonesians who are participating in building for a revolution. How do you deal with the fact that in 1967, where the OSPAW was created, the Organization of Solidarity between Africa, Asia, and Latin America. That was initially supposed to have happened someplace in the Middle East, but ended up being happening where? In Cuba in 1967. And that's where this massive movement bringing all the colonized people together in a common movement to win our freedom. And how can you explain that all these leftists who love class and love all this stuff, is it their love of class that made it unnecessary for them to come out in demonstrations when Malcolm X was assassinated? Is their love of class because they didn't understand the so-called intersection of class and race, that they didn't come out when Martin Luther King was killed? It was Africans who damn near burned down Washington, D.C. When this thing happened. Where were the white people then? And the white leftists? Where were these communists who love us? And going back as far as 1907 in Stuttgart, Germany, the Communist International had one of its convention, the Communist International, occurred in Stuttgart, Germany, had hundreds of people who attended as delegates, and then thousands, I think maybe 9,000 outside in the rallies. And that Communist International, and you can Google this, the one of the winning proposals that they dealt with was that in opposition to destruction of colonialism. They said you can't do that. There must be colonialism. There has to be socialist colonialism. And this was not just, this was colonialism based on where all these resources were coming from the rest of the world. So they wanted all these resources to continue. And so they were opposed to getting rid of colonialism. We saying that this is the starting point. The colonial question is the starting point. That's where you will find the integrity and the honesty of all these forces who seem to have some stake in the continuing existence of the oppression, exploitation. And you got the left coming up with the most clever, sometimes ingenious explanations of why you can't support the black movement. You're splitting the international working class. What do you mean we're splitting some working class? No, they weren't. Where was the working class? When we were involved in all these struggles, you can count the number of white people who were there. Even during the civil rights movement, you can count them. I feel really proud of SNCC initiating the 1964 Summer Project, where you had people like Goodman and Schwerner, who went to Mississippi as a part of that project, and along with Cheney, who was an African, they were murdered there in Mississippi. And of course, they were murdered in part because they were to be examples for the rest of the white people that you don't do this. And that's why Penny Hess and Jesse Neville, which is extraordinary, that this time when they came against the black movement, they couldn't just encircle and isolate us. They had to go to the white community to attack the black revolution. And that's what they did. This was black power in white face that they see in Penny Hess and Jesse Neville. It's a struggle against colonialism. And look at who they're attacking now. They're attacking people who are standing up for Palestine. They're attacking people who are standing up for the colonized peoples of the world. That's what we see happening. It's a colonial question. And the white left is going to have to get on board. It's going to have to get on board. And I demand it. I require it. Because we plan to govern. We don't plan to be here forever just protesting bad treatment. We say that this bad treatment has to be ended by ending a kind of social system based on colonial exploitation and the theft of our resources. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer, because you basically said a lot of what I have been mulling over in my head and saying a lot of these things. It's just I didn't say it as eloquently as you, and I think this is why also I appreciate when people bring you on. And particularly, I would love to see more people in the independent media space to bring you on. Now, it's interesting how certain people have brought you on, how they were willing to bring you on. And I think this should put some fire or courage between other people who especially are in the independent media space to have you on. I mean, Tucker Carlson had you on.
Yeah.
And he's no.
It was a good discussion.
And so if he can have you on, I think people in the independent media space who are actually on the left can have you on to have these conversations, especially the white left and the independent media space. Because I think it is really an obligation to those of us who may have some privilege to really amplify the voices of Black people, especially on the left, like yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's right. I think that the reason they attacked us is not just because we are saying things, but they attack us because they don't want people to hear what we have to say. And so free speech is about more than talking. I mean, you can go in the jungle and just talk to nobody but yourself. It's not that. It's about hearing. Who has an opportunity? That's why you have the stuff that they call banning on social media and what have you, so nobody can hear you, etc. And if you can hear too much, you know, there's a basis for a little suspicion there. But the fact is that we think this is really important, and we think that we have a responsibility to push, you know, those, especially what characterizes leftists. I mean, look, you talk about Tucker Carlson. We had, what's the comrade's name, who was the arms inspector that they sent into Iraq, who never would give them the answers they wanted, and who they threatened to indict too. They raided his home. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking. Scott Ritter?
Scott Ritter. I mean, you know, we've done things. Scott Ritter has brought brilliant, and he says that I'm a patriot. And he says what we're doing is more patriotic than any of the others are doing, etc. And I say I'll accept that if you characterize defense of free speech, defense of freedom of association, etc. as patriot, I'll accept that. But the point is that the biggest arguments and CPI, the biggest arguments that we've had, opponents we've had, come from the white left. The white left. And where should be a presumption of unity with the struggles of oppressed and colonized peoples around the world. And so they have the ability to do a fundraiser perhaps for something that's happening, you know, like, I mean, even the judge, when the judge sentenced us and he said, you know, there's not going to be any time, not giving anybody any time, and not any fines. And then when it came to travel, he said, and who we can be in touch with, he said, you know, just don't be in touch with Russia right now. He said, but if you want to be in touch with the Salvadoran liberation movement or anything like that, even the judge had the ability to say that. And the left doesn't give us that kind of recognition of the right to have this kind of discussions that we need to have. And we have to have them if we're going to have the movement that we need. We get more banning from the left than we do from people who've been often characterized as right-wingers. Yeah.
I hope they listen to what you said here.
They will. They won't do it right away, but they will, because the movement is. We've been building an extraordinary movement, and you know we're facing and. There are other kinds of contradictions confronting us. We're clear on that. I mean, because it never was a legal thing that they charged. That was the basis of the charge. And if they lose in court, then it doesn't mean that they end doing bad things to us. And even before this happened, in July, on July 4th, I think it was, or right after July 4th, they attacked our office in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we have a 50-foot flagpole with a 15 by 25-foot red, black, and green flag that somebody, you know, pulled up in broad daylight with a military-grade flamethrower and torched the flag, you know, in the sky. I mean, you know, this, and I'm sure that was, you know, like a preliminary, you know, kind of move, you know, against us. So we're going to see, you know, other stuff happen. Other bad stuff happened. There's no doubt about that. They banned us and they've sanctioned us in different banks. The banks, I mean, on one occasion, the banks who we've been dealing with for 20 years declared that we had to pay a mortgage off in something like 10 days of $80,000. You understand? And of course, you know, we paid it off, but they sanctioned us. They even individuals who had bank accounts, they told the people they could not have accounts in those banks anymore. And sometimes on the board of directors of the banks have been FBI agents. I mean, literally, I mean, you look at that, and these are people who have been playing primary roles in the FBI. And I've read that something like 40% of the those kinds of sanctions happen to Muslims in this country. So all this stuff about free, what do they call it? The capitalist economy, free markets, and
Free
etc.
market, yeah.
No. So anyway, so I'd like to just say that I appreciate being able to be here, and I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to save you from having to bring out the hook. But you should also be aware that on August 29th is the 25th anniversary of Durban. The Durban conference in South Africa that declared that African people in the United States should do reparations for slavery and colonialism. And so there's going to be a big thing. We are going to participate in a big thing surrounding that 25th anniversary, and people should be on the lookout for that. Again, on July 22nd, we're going to be in Atlanta, Georgia, and people can get more information about that going to handsoffuhuru.org, handsoffuhuru.org. We're going to be in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where the oral arguments are going to be heard about getting rid of about overturning their conviction for thinking about doing something. And then on the 21st, the day before that, we're going to have a rally in Atlanta, Georgia. So you can get all of this information by going to handsoffuhuru.org. And please do that. We really love to see everybody come on into Atlanta, Hot Atlanta, as they like to call it. And we look forward to seeing you. And I just want to thank you again, comrade, brother JB.
Yeah. Oh man. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I continue to implore people to see, your example as, a North Star for us to follow. Thank you so very much. Please give your love to all the people in the Uhuru movement, as well as the African People's Socialist Party. Give our love and solidarity to all of them. Tell my sister, Akila and Ai, that I look forward to having her back on again.
Okay.
And just please continue to be well and be safe out there. And I thank you for the example that you guys have set for us to follow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Relentless.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
All right, everybody. That was Chairman Omali Yeshitela from the African People's Socialist Party, also part of the Uhuru movement. I put the link in the description as well, and I also just put it in the chat for you guys to be able to go there and support the Uhuru 3. Look, these cases, legal representation, it costs money, it costs funds, let's be honest, and help them out as much as you possibly can so that they are able to clear their name of all the charges, because ultimately we know this is bogus, right? And we know how this system operates. And so if we can offer any assistance to freedom fighters, real freedom fighters, then this is the way that we go. So thank you so very much to the chairman, as well as to the rest of the Uhuru 3, Penny Heston, Jussie Neville, for being such staunch, really pillars in fighting for our freedoms as people here in these United States and across the world. Please go ahead and give a like to the stream. And I'm going to continue on in the second segment, and we're going to finish that up. And then we will get into the chats before we head on out. So going back to this point, and I just want to give myself a bit of a marker here, back to the unsafe segment. So I want to also bring in this point here. As I was just saying before, renters need to make at least $70,000 a year in order to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment within the state of Florida. This is absolutely abhorrent. And the fact is that the people who are security guards at SeaWorld, this is here in Orlando, they would never be able to make this much. And I also did some calculations, right? And in the calculations that I did, I wondered, because of the profits of SeaWorld as well as their parent company, if you were to take the profits and share them equally among all the workers and make this a worker cooperative, right? If you did that, then they still wouldn't be able to make enough to live in the state of Florida and afford an apartment. That's how bad it is. And so United Parks and Resorts, even if you were to make it a worker cooperative, they would not be able, the workers would not be able to afford a 1-bedroom apartment. That's how awful the wealth disparity is. And so when you look at the pay structures and when you look at the affordability crisis, this is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. And this is one of the reasons why I talk about mutual aid being so important, because we have to be able to come together and help our fellow workers as well. Yes, we do this for the housed people, but the unhoused people, but a lot of unhoused people also, they work. And in the article that I was reading about the security guards who work at SeaWorld, some of them are living in motels and some of them are living out their cars. These are people that work full-time jobs, y'all. And so this is why it's so important that we have to talk about these things, not only talk about them, but also act, right? If I remember correctly, I think Savvy Sabs is doing a mutual aid workshop soon. Let me check on that. Let me see. Hang on. I think she's doing I think it might be, I wonder if it's this I wonder if it's this weekend. This is it this Saturday? Let me check. I don't know if I can find it here. Let me see. Is it going to allow me? Let me make sure I do this. Let me see. Okay, let me check here. I think she has a actually, let me check her Twitter, because I know that she said she was going to be doing one on, I think it's the second or third weekend of this month. Let's check. Let's see. Yes, July 25th. Okay. So yes, let me share this with you guys so that I am clear on this. So on Saturday, July 25th, my sister from another mister, Savvy Sabs, is going to be having a mutual aid workshop on July 25th. If you guys want to subscribe to her Substack, and she will give out, and it's absolutely free, and it's available through Zoom, and you guys can listen in to follow exactly how to do mutual aid. Why am I sharing this? Because a lot of us do not know how to do mutual aid, or we don't know how to start, or we just don't have the motivation. And let's be real, some of us need permission to be able to start, because some of us may have imposter syndrome. Some of us may feel like we're not, good enough in this way, but this is deeply important. So Saturday, July 25th at 11 a.m., I'm not sure if I'm working. I don't know if I'm on the schedule to work that day. If I am, then I won't be able to make it. But if I am off, I'm going to do my best to make sure that I can make that. But yes, as far as that is concerned, Saturday, July 25th, this Sunday, I will be doing mutual aid in partnership with the Revolutionary Education Action League. They're doing their Solidarity Hub this Sunday. It's going to be a back to school mutual aid event that they will be doing, because school starts back up again next month. In Florida, school starts back in August. And so for a lot of us, a lot of people, especially within the area, especially the area where I live, a lot of parents are struggling. Some of these parents may be security guards at Seaworld. You never know. And so this is why it's so important for us to continue to do this work, right? So continue to support the work that, it mirrors what Keith McHenry has done, right? Support the work that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has done. Why? Because ultimately, this is how we change the system. It is a gradual process. I know a lot of people want a revolution right now, but the thing is, it's like before. I'll explain it like this. In the world of culinary, there is a French phrase called mise en place. It is French for put in its place. You have to have your things set up in order to be able to create the dish that you wish to make. So not only do you have to have all the ingredients set out, right? You have to have your, do you have your knife? Do you have your paring knife? Do you have your cleaver? Do you have your cutting board? Do you have your towel? Do you have your pans, your pots that are ready? Do you have the oils that you need if you're going to be using oils? Do you have all your different seasonings out? So you're not running around grabbing things as you go. You have it all set up right there and you can get it done. It's the same concept. Mise en place when it comes to revolution. You have to set things up in order for things to actually go in the way in which you want them to go. The problem is we're not applying mise en place because we're not even starting yet. And so when it talks about, helping out our fellow workers, this also is part of the mise en place when it comes to helping out the working class, because we have to set up a mutual aid and dual power base first. You got to set up the foundation. Baby, we ain't even got the gravel to make the concrete yet. We haven't even surveyed the land yet. And so this is why it's so important, because there's going to be more people just like the security guards at SeaWorld. They're going to be there by the thousands. There's going to be more people that are going to be unhoused. It's going to go up. We already know all this. But what are we doing in order to push forward something that is much better for our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, future? We have to be willing to plant the tree on which the shade we will never be able to sit under. And that means setting things up now, right? When you plant a seed in the ground, what is the first thing that starts to grow out of the seed? The roots. But do you see the roots when it starts growing? Unless you have something transparent over it, no, you don't see those roots. You just see bare ground, nothing there. But the roots have already taken hold if you start to plant the seed and water it. The thing is that that's what we have to do. We have to plant the seeds. We got to water it. And you're not going to see instant results in the beginning. But as you continue to water, then you start to see more sprouting. And that's the thing that is absolutely necessary when it comes to movements like this. A lot of times we will be dejected because we will see some crap happening on the left. And then we'll be like, oh man, see, this is why the left never wins. But the thing is like, we just have to keep our heads down and keep working. Never mind all this back and forth between internet personalities, all this back and forth between this person has this many followers and they're not doing this, or this person has said that, who's particularly on the left and they're not left enough and blah blah blah. No. Get that out of your mind. They are a distraction. The work on the ground matters more. Do not take your eye off the ball. They're shining a laser in your eye. They're trying to get a birdie in your eye so that you can dart your eyes and take your eyes off the ball for a second so they can take it from you. Do not let that happen. This is exactly what's going on right now. The BS about Grand Platinum, okay, all right, let's move on. We know the Democratic Party is full of doo-doo. So why are we gonna continue that? And we sure as hell know that you know the Republican Party is the organizational version of a dingleberry. So why in the world are we paying attention to either one of those parties? It doesn't make sense for us to do so. So I want us to really focus on touching grass. We got to touch grass and get outdoors and meet people, right? Just like Louis Armstrong said in A Wonderful World, looking at people saying, how do you do? Right? Shaking hands, kissing babies. You know what I mean? And so how do we help the workers? It's by doing that same work on the ground. Because there's going to be another Seaworld. There's going to be another Disney. There's going to be another Amazon. There's going to be another Walmart. Right? There's going to be another Kroger. There's going to be another Apple. There's going to be another Microsoft. There's going to be, it's always going to be there unless we start actually making the plans to dismantle this system now. And don't just talk about it, be about it. This is one of the reasons why it was so important for me to have Keith McHenry and Chairman Omali Yeshitela on. This is what I meant was looking at the past and what they did and seeing that and gleaning from them how we can adapt to 21st century movement and actually usher forth something better. Now, I don't mean to rant, but this is why it's so important that we consider these stories that are local as well, because we have to see what's going on the ground around us. Look at this. Tourism drives $94.5 billion impact across Central Florida. That's $94.5 billion just in the central part of this state. Right? Direct visitor spending generated $59.9 billion. This equates to visitors spending more than $164 million a day. This level of visitor spending offsets the annual tax burden for Orange County residents by $10,200 per household. Tourism supports 30% of all jobs in the region. The total economic impact supports more than 468,000 jobs in 2024, nearly 1% increase from 2023. In 2024, state and local taxes collected from visitor activity increased 2.5%, reaching $6.7 billion. This is one of the entertainment capitals of the world, and yet the people who work in it are being treated like trash because that's how the system is designed. And it will not stop until we are actually able to come together. So whether you're able to do mutual aid or learn how to do mutual aid by going to Savvy Sab's workshop, if you're in Central Florida and you want to come and help out do mutual aid, I'll be out there in these streets doing mutual aid with Rio for their Solidarity Hub. So if you want to pull up and do some mutual aid to help people out, come on out, come through, do it. Or start something in your local area. If you are in St. Louis, Missouri, or if you're in Places like St. Petersburg, Florida, you have the African People's Socialist Party. In places like here in Orlando or places like Fort Lauderdale, you have Food Not Bombs. You have so many different resources to do something. And I know you're exhausted, you're tired, you're taking care of your families, but many hands make the load light. Can you dedicate, 1 to 2 times per month or bi-monthly or hell, once a quarter, something in order to help your fellow neighbors? At least just volunteer. You don't have to create an entire chapter. You don't have to create an entire organization. Just help somebody out. And so this is one of the ways in which we can actually help people. And these security guards in places like Seaworld are keeping people safe, which is one of the reasons why I want to humanize them. There's a video. It is a wholesome video of a security guard dancing at SeaWorld. I'm going to mute it because of the music, because I want to get copyright claim. But these are the people that make your visits to these places all the more better. So let me share. So that's the reason why I wanted to share that, because a lot of people are seeing that these are the people, they work day in and day out, continue to keep them not just in your thoughts, but support them through your actions as well. And this SeaWorld, man, shame on y'all. But in a capitalist system, y'all ain't got no shame. All right, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much to everyone. Let's get into the comments, and then we shall be on our way out. Let me check on the Kick side just to see if we have any gifted subs. I think we covered that. Kick is not frequented as much. Let's check to see if we have any. Yes. Okay. We do have Rumble rants here. Okay. So let me enlarge this. Hang on. There we go. All right. All right. So let me share this, and then we will get to the super chats as well. Okay. Thank you so very much for this hymn card. It says, remember when opening mail was a thing COINTEL did against leftists? Now they can read brainwaves. Why is no one on the left talking about that? That's interesting. That's scary. That is scary, hymn card. Thank you for informing me, but it's also scary. Hymn card, thank you so much for this. Said Nita Farhani said on PBS, most cameras you walk past are reading your brain waves. Said it can steal your pen. Oh my gosh. Look, sometimes these things sound like conspiracy theories, but sometimes conspiracy theories end up being true, baby. I don't put nothing past these greedy caps. Caps, I mean capitalists. I don't put nothing past them. Thank you for this as well, hemp card. It says the UN is drafting laws for neural rights, yet most on the left gaslight you when you prove this. My gosh, the rights of thought. Oh my goodness. Thank you for this. It says really powerful song, Dead Prez song they made with Chairman Omali's speech. I'm gonna have to watch that. I don't want to get copyright claim by putting it on here, but that sounds interesting. It says, and the truckers didn't go ahead with their protests because they might get their accounts froze. Yeah, they're real tough as they claim they're going to go out in blaze of glory. Interesting. And then Mary Ploppin says, oh, I love Chairman Omali. And Mary says, I suck at mise en place. Look, we all got someplace to improve on, Mary Ploppins. We all got someplace to improve. I know I definitely do. I am not organized much at all. But, you know, we'll get there together. We'll get there together. All right, everybody. Let's go here. Edward says, I always believe that race goes hand in hand with class solidarity. The problem with Eugene Debs of the Socialist Party was that they were still hostile towards African Americans. There was an interesting article out of Black Agenda Report where they actually talked about how the AFL was racist against Black workers, and they even got violent with Black workers. And so the CIO actually started bringing in Black workers into their union because of how racist the white workers, union members of the AFL were. Some of those union members were also part of the Communist Party. And so it was all this talk about, oh, well, these Black workers are making they're taking our jobs, or they're making our wages, you know, less because they're taking they're commanding less money, blah, blah, blah. So it's a tale as old as time. And so this is why it is so important to, you know, also look at it from a colonial perspective. Like the chairman said, I think we have to have that as well. We have to talk about that. Also, Wendy said, Scott Ritter, yeah, thank you so much for giving us a heads up. I'm just going to say this. I would like to have Scott Ritter on to talk about especially geopolitics. It's hard to get some people on because they're so busy. And then, you know, it's also difficult because they have to be very careful. Because, you know, some people are weird. Some people can be wild. You know, it depends. So, you know, of course, people, you know, like Scott have to be very careful, especially going through what he's been through. You know, with the US government coming after him, you know, I expect that he has to move very cautiously. So, but I would love to have him on. So hopefully one day I'll be able to do that. Let me go up here. Rondo says animal prison should be illegal. True Sensei says all animals that they deserve to be free, not exploited and abused. Says same goes for zoos. You know, it's funny because I'm thinking about it now. If we had a system where we could move more freely, and if people actually had all their basic needs met in a system that didn't prioritize profits, we wouldn't even need to have zoos. We could just jump on a flight or maybe even a lengthy cruise to the areas where they actually live instead of having them all in one localized place in a land where they're not native. Like if I want to go see giant pandas, I should be able to take a trip to Asia to see giant pandas and tigers, right? And you know, elephants. But then if I want to see the big African elephants with the big ears, then, you know, I go down to Africa. Or if I want to see the lions or the meerkats, right? Or the flamingos, you know, or, you know, the antelope. Like if I want to see that, then I'll go down there. Virginia Wilson says, Uhuru, yes, salute our Chairman Omali Yeshitela, one of the Uhuru 3 and the leader of the Uhuru movement. Thank you so very much, Miss Virginia Wilson. Tapio says, hands off the chairman, hands off Uhuru 3. Thank you so very much. True Sensei says, I feel for anyone trying to make an honest living while navigating through a capitalist system, yet I believe that zoos and animal theme parks should be banned. Support local animal rehab sanctuaries. I saw this one video. There was a rehab sanctuary for big cats, medium-sized and big cats, and they actually gave catnip to lions. It was lions, tigers, leopards. They had panthers, jaguars. The lions were loving the catnip. If you've never seen a lion go belly up and like look like they're almost on ecstasy with catnip, you don't know what you're missing. It was the most adorable thing, but also I would not be near that thing if you paid me. But it was still cute. I'm talking about big male lion with the mane, 400-pound, death machine with teeth turning into a house cat before your eyes. It's wild, but I loved it. Thank you so very much to Michelle M. I don't want to mispronounce your name. My apologies, but says salute to Jaybefaunt channel for today's program and coverage. Thank you so very much. Have you guys considered subscribing? Thank you. I appreciate it very, very much. Yes, Bryce, what Chairman Omali Yeshitela said, like, look, our intelligence as Black people are constantly challenged. We're constantly being told that we are low IQ and things like that, despite all the advancements that we made for society. And our intelligence is always being questioned due to anti-Blackness and white supremacy, right? And he said, basically we're too stupid to think for ourselves. That's what they think. When in reality, we can, and when we do, they got a problem with it. OBE Direct says, Chairman Omali, inspiration, leader, teacher, visionary. All the best as Uhuru fight against government that is supposed to work for us, not against us. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Thank you so very much. Roger says, if you wish to do something about the Seaworld and other big businesses, we must run a CBI amendments reversing the 1919 Michigan State Supreme Court decision of Dodge versus Ford, which led to shareholder primacy, changing the fiduciary rule from making sure shareholders get theirs off the top to where the interest of the workers, consumer safety and environment, public safety and stability run the economy will hold primacy over the shareholders. Thank you very much for that. This is an interesting question. I guess it was directed at Chairman. It says, how do you build Pan-Africanism with FBAs or rejecting Pan-Africanism? That is going to have to be an internal conversation that we have together. And unfortunately, because for the sake of time, I do not have time to get into that right now. But, ultimately, we have to realize that capitalism does not serve Black people. Whether you're Black American or you're from a Black immigrant, it does not serve us. It never has and it never will. And I need my Black people, especially my Black Americans, to realize that. Although some will just roll their eyes at me and suck their teeth. But I'm standing 10 toes down on that one. And I've talked about it before. So they can search the channel for that one. I love y'all, but we gotta get past that. Ooh. All right, guys. So there's so many more comments, so many great comments that I would really want to get into. Hello to Holly. Yes, good to see you. Hello to Kate. Good to see you as well. Accord Lord is all up in the chat. Good to see you. You guys had some great conversations going on too in the background. Roots and Roots and Bark says U.S. has always been the biggest counter-revolutionary force around the globe. Absolutely true. No lies said there. All right, everybody. And Sean says, hey, JB, suck outside at the work and heat. Oh, man. Yeah. So, like I always do, I want to share a funny video that you guys will laugh at, because we have to laugh to keep ourselves from crying. And also, joy is revolutionary, right? And this keeps us going. There's joy in the process, but also I want you guys to enjoy yourself during the process as well. And so I'm going to be sharing this as well. I saw that this was hilarious, because I think it's important that we constantly try to keep our spirits up. And keeping our spirits up is so important, especially in this day and age. And I hope you guys are able to do this as well. Let me share this. Let me see. Yes. Hopefully this thing will work. Okay. And I don't know. Sometimes hearing other people laugh makes me hang on. Roger says you ain't read all supers. I didn't. Hang on. Oh, wait. There is one. Oh, there's a couple of them. Okay. I'm just now getting to these. I did not see it. I'm sorry. My apologies. Before I get to that, let me read these. Okay. Let me see. Thank you for the super sticker, Michelle. Thank you so very much for that. Thank you for reminding me, Roger. I did not see that. So Roger says, Bacon's Rebellion, Wilmington, North Carolina. Italians and Irish immigrants with us until being accepted into whiteness is exactly why FBA is wary of class team up. Unfortunately, there's some points there. Unfortunately. Yeah. So yeah. Chris says, I have heard some U.S. Pan-Africanists feel that socialists help Black people back by telling Black people not to engage in capitalism by building businesses. What are your thoughts, JB? I mean, capitalism is the whole reason why our ancestors got here in the first place and why we were in chains. Unfortunately, Black capitalism is not going to save us. And people keep thinking that all we need to do is just work within the system and then we will be okay. Hell, most white people aren't even okay. And who owns most of the capital in capitalism? What makes us think it's going to be okay for us? Right? Who are the examples that we have? Tyler Perry, Bob Johnson, Oprah Winfrey? Like, no, baby. No. Jay-Z? Rihanna? And she's a Black immigrant. Like, no. Why in the world would I, sit here knowing that my ancestors were brought here as the capital in capitalism and embrace a system that enslaved them? That doesn't make sense to me. That's incongruent with my values. And so it sounds basically like some U.S. Pan-Africanists they have regrets because they think socialists held them back, when in reality, like, they can do whatever they want. But as far as integrity goes, why would we embrace a system that not only exploits us, but also exploits our people across the global south? Like explain being a Pan-Africanist to me and being okay with capitalism when capitalism breeds not just only colonialism, it also continues colonialism, but it also breeds imperialism. And the reason why Africa is in the situation it's in is a huge part because of colonialism and capitalism and imperialism. Like, if we really have solidarity with all African peoples across the world, especially in the global south, why in the world would we embrace a system that's going to exploit them? And on top of that, you can point to whatever social democratic system that exists in Europe, but they only have that because they exploited this global south, especially in Africa. So therefore, why in the world would we morally and ethically embrace a system that is going to hold our brothers and sisters and siblings in the global south hostage just so that we can have some extra health care and some paid parental leave? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why are we doing that? Like, what part of nobody's free until we're all free don't they understand? So to me, it's like, how can you be a Pan-Africanist and not be a socialist? It doesn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. It's an anathema. That's the best I can give you in a short form. I could go on further, but it's not, you know, I'm way over time already. But it's not showing up. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, guys. So I'm gonna share this so we can laugh, and then we're heading on out. So everybody, be prepared. It's about to get funny. All right.
Sira, banana.
Потому что, ну не могу.
Tranquila que
Wait. When you try to turn the car over, when you put the key in the ignition.
Absolut.
Wait, but who's Galvin Glenn?
Yeah, when you try to turn the car over, just be, it's just not starting. All right, guys. So, you gotta you gotta laugh to keep yourself from crying. Of course, they're definitely laughing and they're not crying at all. Guys, thank you so very much. Thank you to Keith and Henry for joining in and giving us the spilling the tea about the memoirs. And thank you so very much to Chairman Omali Yeshitela for telling us about what's happening on July 22nd so that we may be able to be present and alert, and as well as giving us really perspective about, really building movements here in America, especially for Black people. Guys, please also make sure to have solidarity with workers in your local area. Start to focus on what they're doing and try to help them out because they are really going through it. as the system comes to a close, capitalism is on decline, it's going to be harming workers even more just to have its grasp around our necks. So thank you so much to everybody. Look, continue to do what you can in helping out all of the workers. And please continue to be there for each other. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Do all the things if you got them. And please make sure also to flood Savvy's comment section and say JB sent you. Can you do that for me? Can you do that for a brother? I love you for being you. Mwah, forehead kisses. I will see you guys in the next one. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can look here. Mwah, forehead kisses.